the how to love God?
Yes.
Sure, I'll just share the screen. Yeah, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
So Ashok had informed that he may not join, is it?
Yeah, he's not joining.
I think so. Okay. Mhm. So only three of us.
To start, yeah, let's get started.
Okay. Okay. Jai Baba. How to
Jai
love
Baba.
God? To love God in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our own dear ones, we love God. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. If we suffer in the suffering of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. If
Hello.
instead of worrying,
Namaste. Sorry.
if instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many others, we are loving God. If we endure our lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and find Him as our own self. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Thank you. So I'm juggling many things today. I'm babysitting. I'm
Whatever. So I'm having fun. Nandini is gone to her ashram, so so that was all the juggle this morning. So let's get back to Listen Humanity. Last time we read up to the message for, there's a series of messages. I think we stopped before the message for youngsters. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, correct. So we'll continue from there. Before that, any thoughts? Did Kama summarize last time? I came into the call literally at the end, last minute, just, and I heard you guys wrapping up. So did Kama, you have any thoughts, summary before we continue?
What were you?
What?
Sorry, I'm in the bus, but what were we reading? You wanted me to summarize last week's session?
Yeah, did you summarize last week's session? If you did, that's fine. Otherwise, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't
if you
even
have
remember.
anything to say, this is your time.
Nothing.
Yeah, no, I think that this is the phases and stages.
Nothing.
Okay, I will continue with the messages and then move to the next chapter. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's start with message for youngsters. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. I remember very well when not long ago I was just like one of you. You little ones are especially dear to me. Children are innocent and free from vain egotism. Children have no low desires. When, after becoming free from all childishness, man really becomes childlike, he realizes God. Whether you like it or not, you must soon grow up and cease being childish. More and more, you must enjoy letting your teachers teach and your elders lead you while you are not growing into men and women. Unless you're willing to learn and ready to obey, they cannot help you as they would like to do. The whole of life is like playing the game of hide and seek, in which you must find your real self. I give you my blessings. that you may succeed in this realization that life is all-time play. God alone is real, all else is false, and so you must try to love God who is within us all. To gain this love, you should try to be honest in your thoughts, words, and actions. This is the first of the messages. It's for the children, and I think it's a fantastic example Baba has picked up for, it applies to us as well, right? But a hide and seek is a universal game. Everybody in the world plays it. You don't need any props. Everybody relates to it, and it's the biggest excitement for children as they grow up. And he says the whole of life is just playing the game of hide and seek and finding the real self. So I think in this little gem of a message, there is a very there's a level of profundity that we can't miss, right? So that's the first one. So with that, let's go to the message to the youth. I think the heading should have been in the middle, but there's something wrong here. All right, message to the youth. It is the privilege of youth to be full of energy and hope. Not being caught in any ruts, your dreams of the future have the advantage of being inspired by an unfettered imagination. In the glow of a newborn love or in the warmth of a newly caught enthusiasm, you are quick to respond to the call for action and sacrifice. Life would be poorer without these qualities that are predominantly present in youth. But if you are to derive the full benefit of the qualities with which you are abundantly endowed, you must also try to acquire some other qualities which are rare in youth. Hope should be fortified by a courage which can accept failure without upset. Enthusiasm should be harnessed by the wisdom that knows how to wait with patience for the fruit of action. Idealistic dreams about the future should be balanced by a sense of the realities of the present. And the glow of love should allow itself to be illumined by the full exercise of reason. It is easy for youth to be absorbed in realizing the ideal that it becomes bitter against the present and the past. But it is as well to cultivate a spirit of idealizing the real while being appreciative of the heritage of the past. The world as it is may not seem to conform to the pattern which youth adores, but you must never forget that it is always good enough to merit your most loving attention. In your desire to improve the world, do not, by becoming bitter, surrender your right to be happy. Youth loves freedom and therefore has a natural impulse to rebel against all authority. This is well and good, but you should make a real effort to keep free of the many illusions to which youth is particularly susceptible. True self-expression need not include irreverence for others. True criticism need not involve snobbishness or cynicism. True freedom need not manifest hostility or separateness. Freedom without responsibility is a doubtful boon. Freedom is worth having only where there is self-restraint and willingness to cooperate with others. Youth is always willing to act and take risks. It should be allowed to yield freely to this fearless and imperative urge of life within. But while engaged in action, youth must take every care that it is creative and not destructive. Let your watchwords always be love and service. So that's the message for the youth. Yeah.
This message to the youth seems to be very profound. Each paragraph is full
Amazing.
of Each sentence gives the shades of spirit of fighting by youth and
Youth.
what they should always keep in mind before do that aspect.
And he's not going against that. He's not saying stop that, but he's saying channelize it in the right direction. The sensitivity and
Yes,
the balance is so beautiful.
So each aspect of the youth, he is trying to balance with
Channelize.
another aspect. So it's a nice message to youth.
Amazing message. I think again, I only wish as a child I had got this message, and as youth, I got this message, right? But anyway, you get only what you get. So yeah, I think there's a lot more publicity that both of these deserve, and I think these are good. We can put them to good use when asked to talk to either the youth or kids about Baba. I think this is a very, very good reproduction and very useful for such occasions.
Yes.
So now, students, artists, social workers, and public institution servants. Anybody in this call belonging there? No. Okay, we'll see what he says.
I am partly.
Oh, yes, correct. Correct. So this is for you. Let me start. Literacy is not education, and education is not culture, and all these together do not constitute Gyan or Gnosis. This stands in a class by itself, independent of any concomitant factors. Illiteracy and ignorance invite exploitation, but literacy can also become a willing tool in the hands of those who exploit. Education devoid of culture is inherently destructive, although on the surface it seems to represent progress. Since all types of people have claimed that their greatness constitutes culture, the word has become indefinite in the minds of the public. True culture is the result of spiritual values assimilated into life. Therefore, you must keep before you the ideal of that spiritual culture, which once developed imparts life and beauty to all undertakings: educational, technical, industrial, social, moral, and political, and pierces through their differences to produce unity. This results in the development of the highest character in the life of a nation or individual. All men in the flesh are unquestionably equal, yet no two men are equal. Despite the fact that one sun shines on the one world, sunshine is not the same the world over. In their hopes and their fears, men are the same everywhere. Yet, at a given moment, this one is antagonistic to that one. Love for God, love for fellow beings, love of service, and love of self sacrifice. In short, love in any shape and form is the finest give and take in existence. Ultimately, it is love that will bring about the much desired equating of human beings all over the world, and without necessarily disturbing the inherently diverse traits of mankind. It is infinitely better to hope for the best than to fear the worst. Time is composed equally of night and day. In its inevitable course of ups and downs, the world is fast approaching once again a glorious dawn. My blessings to you all. So that was the message for those in service of various types. Now there is a special message for the Harijans and laborers. To think that birth or profession is the basis for difference between men is to dream in the past and remain dead to the present. In those things which represent true value in human heritage, all men are equal. Cleanliness of mind and body have never been and never can be the monopoly of any one class or creed. They should be aspired to and can be achieved by everyone. At the same time, it should be recognized that to maintain such purity in the face of increasing opposition from various directions will entail suffering. The spiritual status of any people is in direct proportion to its ability to suffer. Suffering should be intelligent and deeply penetrating. When a people develop their spiritual outlook on life, they automatically increase their capacity to suffer. Selfishness multiplied by population results in war, exploitation, persecution, and poverty. Selfishness multiplied by population brings about selflessness multiplied by population brings about peace and plenty. All the modern fads rampant in the guise of politics, economics, materialism, communism, nationalism, and socialism must be judged by the criterion of selflessness. Whether you are religiously suppressed or politically oppressed, whether you are exploited economically or sweated industrially, the suffering you endure will determine your spiritual position. Man-made differences, like all other things made by man, take no time to change in changing times. A great changeover is approaching, in which rights must and will be restored, and in which responsibilities must also be shouldered. It is indeed great to be a man, but it is far greater to be man to man. Irrespective of birth levels and belief tables, my blessing to all those who feel themselves oppressed, depressed, or suppressed for any cause whatsoever. So this is again universally applicable in the sense that it even applies to not just the Harijans or anybody who's oppressed anywhere in the world, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, you name it. I think this is a very good message. What I did not understand was one word here, belief tables. Anybody, any news on that? What's a belief table? Birth levels and belief tables. That's a new phraseology. So I just want to check if anybody has some light to throw on that.
I feel birth level
Difference
is.
Sorry,
Yes,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was wondering whether we are trying to understand the definition of belief, because there is belief and there is faith. So real faith is something higher degree than the belief.
So that you have taught me. I totally submit to that. If you remember, it was discourses, right? And
Yes,
you
correct.
made that distinction very powerfully to me. I thank you. I thank you for that. But here the specific thing is birth levels and belief tables. So it's just a phraseology.
Birth levels is almost similar to what we have, say, head of God is the Brahmins. What is the classification that we do
Varnashrama,
on
dharma,
that basis?
castes.
Yes. And belief levels, I had some idea what is that. Belief levels is, say, different religions, the way we believe in certain practices, rituals, and other things. So the core essence being the same, we do it in different ways, in different religions, different ritual patterns, and all that. So that may be the belief levels.
Possible. Belief, no, but I think he says birth levels, and I didn't think of it the way you said. I totally agree with you. Most likely is the caste system, the hierarchy of castes and creeds in other religions as well. Wherever there is always a pecking order that develops as the faith or culture develops, society develops. There is a pecking order that gets developed. So that could be birth levels. Belief table, I still don't know. Maybe what is belief table?
Belief table,
Anyway.
Possible. That is how I looked at it. Maybe Baba has say higher level of thinking on those issues, and also he doesn't want to use the already used coinage of words and sentences, but gives a different shade.
Yeah, correct.
I think it could have been just belief, but he has used the word belief tables is because I think we have structure. If you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that would happen, and this is how this everything is structured. Actually, you do this puja, you get this, and all that. These kind of structure which can be put as a table. In a mathematical. Yes. That's why I think this word has been used, but it could have been just beliefs.
Agreed. You can take it as beliefs as well, birth levels and beliefs, but some sort of structured dependency, cause and effect based on belief, which has developed through organized religion and society is the reference here.
Yes.
Agreed. Good summary. Good interpretation. Thank you. So with that, there's also
I can say one more thing. Belief is more like man-made. There's false beliefs and true beliefs. True or false. It's very relative. Whereas faith is an absolute sense. It's the truth. Faith is based on true and lasting values kind of thing. So it's more of an absolute aspect. It has nothing to do with people's opinions or anything. But beliefs can be very relative based on one's own conditioning and stuff like that. So beliefs are very changeable, Yeah, Baba.
Yes. I'm totally confused on the chapter sequence after all your resequencing of Maya, but I'm referring to what we're talking is all available in Discourses, Maya, the 4 chapters, but in what sequence, don't ask me. The book has 1, 2, 3, 4, but Kama's recommended sequence, which by the way, I agree with, is I think 4, 1, 2, I don't know, 4, 2, 1 or whatever. But that's where you'll go through this cycle, this values, values and beliefs, and what values being values, belief state, right? So it's amazing. I mean, it's so difficult, these terms, that even after 2 reads, I think it's worth doing Discourses, how many ever times, because there's so much that you internalize each time. It's just unbelievable, right? Okay. So on that note, let's move to the general message. General message. What is wrong with the world today? Such questions are bound to arise in thinking minds, but often the answers given are not completely honest. Diagnosis given and remedies adopted have all been biased, and so the situation remains vague and unresolved. The crux of the matter lies in the correct reinterpretation of the ancient word religion. The West has very little religion, and whenever one hears of it, it is either subservient to politics or at best an adjunct of material life. The East is suffering from an overdose of religion, and consequently, it hankers desperately for a material antidote. Religion in the West is synonymous with scientific progress, which is distinctive in its manifestation. Religion in the East, and in India in particular, has gone underground and been replaced largely by crude ceremonies vague rituals and lifeless dogmas. Instead of nourishing the seeds of peace and plenty, this subterranean religion tries to propagate communism, fanaticism, nationalism, and patriotism, which have now become bywords associated with leadership and greatness, suffering and sanctity. In short, religion as a living force has become obsolete. The urgent need of today to resuscitate religion is to dig it out of its narrow, dark vault and let the spirit of man shine out once again in its pristine glory. The most practical thing in the world is to be spiritually minded. It needs no special time, place, or circumstance. It is not necessarily concerned with anything out of the ordinary daily routine. It is never too early or too late to be spiritual. It is just a simple question of having the proper mental attitude towards lasting value, changing circumstance, and avoidable eventualities, as well as a healthy sense of the inevitable. Spirituality is not restricted to, nor can it be restricted by anyone or anything, anywhere, at any time. It covers all life for all time, and it can be easily be achieved through selfless service and that pure love which knows no bondage and seeks no boundary. A mighty surge of this spirituality is about to sweep over the world. My blessings to you all. There is no more ready means by which the first outlines of the inner self can be known than through complete honesty. Honesty with one's fellow beings is the beginning step. From this, there cannot help but come honesty with oneself. It is heartening to find that even the worst of one's nature is not frightening, and that the very fact of having faced the worst in oneself gives the courage to look at the challenges of life and the path. Having achieved honesty and found courage, the sustaining self begins to reveal itself. To be honest is certainly not easy, for never before has dishonesty and hypocrisy been so rampant in the world as today. If the least hypocrisy creeps into one's thoughts, words, or deeds, God, who is the innermost self in us all, keeps himself hidden. Hypocrisy is a million-headed cobra. Today, there are so-called saints in the world who tell people to be honest and not hypocritical. Yet they themselves are deeply involved in dishonesty. If you cannot love God and cannot lead saintly lives, then at least do not make a pretense of it. The worst scoundrel is better than a hypocritical saint. Honesty is not only a light on the inner path, it is also one of the most effective means for relief of the suffering which afflicts all, man or woman, rich or poor, great or small. Relief from all kinds of suffering is within ourselves if, in all circumstances and in every walk of life, we try to think honestly, act honestly, and live honestly. Infinite honesty is one of the aspects of God, and therefore the least hypocrisy in ourselves keeps us aloof from God. Simplicity and all it implies is another great aid in the development of human love. Simplicity springs from humility, and humility is often confused with modesty. Modesty is weakness, but humility is strength. Therefore, a world of difference separates the two. The moment you say, I say in all humility, the very use of the expression betrays your ego. Even though you believe that you're being humble, you're expressing your egotism. The difficulty is not resolved even if you try with true honesty to express true humility. Inevitably, obstacles arise, such as the thought of what others may think of your expression of humility. No sooner is humility given expression, then it is no longer humility. It is nonsense to give deliberate expression to humility. A life of humility is lived spontaneously and should not give rise to thoughts of either humility or modesty. As an example, suppose you start to clean a latrine, but you cannot help noting the smell. A janitor that has cleaned them all his life remains unaffected. The person who parades humility is like the one who notes the smell while cleaning a latrine. The person who lives the life of humility is like the sweeper who is immune to the odor and completely unworried about what others think of him. He actually lives the life of a janitor. To have to try to be humble is also nonsense. You must be so natural that your life becomes humility personified, which means all strength freed from all weakness. So, whatever you are, express it unmindful of public opinion and the reaction of others. Be natural. If you're dishonest, do not try to hide yourself behind the curtain of honesty. This does not mean that you should be dishonest. Above all else, be content with your lot, rich or poor, happy or miserable. Understand that God has designed it for your own good and be resigned to His will. Remember the present in the frame of the past and the future. You eternally were and always will be. You have had innumerable forms as man and woman, beautiful and ugly, strong and weak, healthy and sickly, powerful and helpless. And now you are here again in another form. Until you gain spiritual freedom, you will be invested with many such forms. So why seek temporary relief now, which would only result in further bindings later? Do not ask God for money, fame, power, health, or children, but seek His grace, and it will lead you to eternal bliss. One of the greatest things to possess is faith, which ultimately leads to conviction. And from conviction, one day arises realization. There are no two kinds of faith. Faith is the last thing to be labeled. The only question is whether one has strong faith or weak faith. Some manifest faith only to the point of acknowledging forms and ceremonies, while some go beyond this to seek the kernel and eschew the hull. Believing either in the impersonal infinite existence or in the personal existence of one's own master. Thus, it is only a question of degree of faith. In wholehearted faith, relief will be found from the many sufferings which afflict man. We are already in possession of infinite power and happiness, but it is our way of life which prevents us from enjoying these eternal treasures of God. Faith can provide a key to attain them. Eventually, faith must give way to conviction, for after all, faith is only faith. There are two kinds of experience, external and internal. External experience can result through the gross media. What we actually see of the gross world with our gross eyes gives us conviction of a sort. But there are occasions when even this conviction is based on incorrect analysis. Thus, if we see a man drinking milk from a bottle under a toddy tree, we assume unconsciously that he's drinking toddy, which is incorrect. What is seen with the inner eye gives absolute conviction and never can be false. Such is the case, for example, when one sees with the inner eye that God is infinite existence. Therefore, what is really needed to give eternal conviction is not mere theorizing or reasoning or even faith, but actual inner experience. Once God has been realized, there's no question of faith or even of conviction, just as there is no question of man's needing faith to believe that he is a man. Having transcended the boundaries of faith, one finds oneself identified with the infinite and the one self manifested everywhere. Toddy is, of course, a cheap, intoxicating drink commonly made in India from the sap of a toddy tree. So, with that, we come to the end of this chapter.
Karthik, I would like to refer to
Sure.
one sort of a new definition for God.
Sure. Which page?
I'll just check that. I marked it.
I like
there.
the definition of religion. I thought it was so beautiful. He just calls it an adjunct to material life. It's brutal, but that's what it is. You can cover it by all means.
This is page number 183.
Okay.
Last but one paragraph. Infinite honesty is one of the aspects of God.
Yeah. And therefore, the
therefore,
least
the least hypocrisy in our results keeps us aloof from God.
Yeah.
Nice expression.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
The earlier part of the chapter was quite hard-hitting in terms of hypocrisy and honesty. And as Baba lovers, it gives a lot to think about, even in, I mean, let me give a very practical examples. In meetings, are we giving right feedback? Are we honest in, what is happening in the teams to the management, even to that extent, it is, I think, applicable. And it is too much to think about, actually. And it's very hard hitting. The Baba has said that hypocrisy, as Baba lovers, how we pose ourselves to the world and what we really are internally. And I think I find a lot of, at least, substantial difference how people perceive me and how actually I am, which I truly know myself to be. So that is very hard hitting, Baba.
Well said. In fact, I'm going through this in the last week, literally, right, where I've been recalibrating and wondering about exactly what I read. So this was very personal for me. The thoughts, deeds, thoughts, words, and deeds being aligned, and honesty is something that I've been going through, like you said, in real life. How often we resort to compromise on honesty, and how often we we compromise on being we think dishonesty is acceptable, or we do it in our false value of trying to say that it is for a larger good. Most often we rationalize like that, right?
It's because everybody does it. For example, we have a fuel allowance of 1.5 lakh rupees. People just produce bills,
Yeah, that's quite a lot to
get from
meet in one household.
Yeah. So, and it's a norm. It's not something which is, they exchange. I have some extra. Can you have some extra bills? Give it to me for claiming, actually, because that's the amount you get tax free.
Correct.
So, in our kind of environment that we work around in the society, that's something which is everybody does. So it's like a norm, but it is dishonesty. So as Baba lovers, it's very difficult to lose that kind of money and be ready to accept that. Actually, very challenging. Yeah, Baba.
Amazing. I mean, it's not easy to take those decisions, and I know that the idea of honesty, even from childhood and what you're taught and everything, right? We unfortunately bring in morality to honesty, and that's the problem, right? So the morality being infused with honesty complicates everything, because you then rationalize by thinking that you may be doing something, that you may bring in a little bit of dishonesty because morally you're right. There's nothing called morality, and that we have learned in discourses. But here's where I'll confuse you further. I've been thinking a lot in the last 3-4 days about this topic, so this is very relevant, and that's why I'm jumping about like this. The other thing we have to remember is, if you remember violence and non-violence in discourses, there is a mention of dishonesty which is acceptable or which is allowed. And I think you may remember the story of, I think, was it a kid and a mother?
To help others. To help others.
No, yeah,
but
no.
not to serve your own
There's an
purpose.
example of stealing.
Yeah.
There's an example of stealing, or there's an example of what the rest of the world would easily classify as immoral, incorrect, dishonest, being given as an example where Baba says it's okay, right? So I think it goes back to when you bring spirituality into your life, there is nothing like switching on spirituality and switching off spirituality. You'll have to use it in every minute of your life, right? You have to recognize the true value and be sorted in your head as to what impact, what thoughts, words, and deeds you bring together. And of course, the tougher of the two, align those three. If you align those three, you're honest. If you align those three, there's no hypocrisy. Okay. The problem is, we have a thought, we say something else, and we sometimes do something else, right? If you align the three, you're done. Right? But it's easier said than done. Amazing discussion. And as I said, it's pretty personal. And I'm sure all of us go through this struggle. I'm very confident. Kama, anything from your side?
Well, I think that this subject on faith, which has been discussed in this chapter, I think if you relate it to the discourses, you kind of get a good overview. And I think, like what you said, good thoughts, good words, good deeds will lead to honesty and humility and so on and so forth. Of course, Baba talks a lot about how we and there is like and there is natural spontaneity, like, right? If somebody, so some things in life one needs to cultivate first, and then it becomes natural or spontaneous.
Okay, your audio is not that great, but you mentioned you're on the road, so pardon me.
My take on it. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So your audio didn't come through perfectly, but that's okay. I think we got the drift. The last 30 seconds were worse than the rest. So I think we largely understood what you said. Anybody else before we go to the next chapter?
It is so very difficult to live the life of, say, spirituality. Every instant in the process of life is always so very balanced. It needs to be so very balanced. It is really difficult. That's why I always remember why Baba has put a last paragraph in the repentance prayer. I'll just read that. Your unbounded mercy, we ask you to forgive us, O God, for all these sins committed by us. That is the important part of it is now, to forgive us for our constant failures to think and speak and act according to your will. Every instant we fail. And if we realize that, and next instant we correct ourselves, that is the way we have to spiritually live every moment in our life, I think.
Brilliant.
Because these compromises we keep always creating and accepting. That is how we fail every moment.
So Yeah, absolutely. I think brilliant linkage to
This,
the prayer, but I think Sanjay
yeah,
ji mentioned long back as well, right? That it should not resort to a licentiousness for our behavior.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
This prayer has to be honest. Baba is talking of
Yes,
honest, right?
correct,
So if
correct.
this prayer is honest, then only there is a benefit actually. Otherwise,
Correct.
it's just repeating a prayer just for the sake of praying. Yeah,
It's true.
honesty comes here, even here. Actually. So,
In the prayer, yes. No, and also I remember one of the long earlier conversations, you pointed out how just because there is the repentance prayer, are we doing more compromises? Or when you do a compromise,
Yes.
you say, okay, tomorrow I will submit to Baba, right? But so I don't have answers beyond, though I've been thinking a lot, as I said, I don't have any more answers than any of you. It's a long struggle. But the only insight I got was two things. One is get more of Baba into your life, right? It will make that alignment easier, which is the two tools are, I mean, the tool is professional working ego, right? So try to demolish your own personal ego, resurrect the the professional working ego, and operate as though Baba is operating, right? And that makes your alignment, makes your actions a lot more thoughts, words, and deeds probably better. I'm sure better, but then you have to do it every minute of your waking life. The second insight I got was I've often wondered that why does this take so long, right? Why do you need 84 lakh births? And this is the answer, right?
Yes.
So I got my answer to, hey, why should this be mathematically so bloody complex? And then there was my answer, right? If every second there is a possibility of a compromise when there are so many seconds in a waking life, then there you go. You make the math. 84 lakh looks very small, right? So those were the two insights I got as a result of this. Yeah, great.
One important takeaway is the
Come on, your audio is very bad.
Hello,
Come
can you
on,
hear
your
me?
audio is very bad. Can you repeat? Come on.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Can you
can you
hear me
try
now?
now? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think one important takeaway for me was the phrase used, the game of hide and seek, that Baba uses when you
Amazing.
started reading the
Amazing.
discourse.
Amazing.
So when you look at the game of hide and seek and dissect it, in different parts of discourses, he has used phrases like the greatest detective story ever told, which I look at it like a jigsaw puzzle or like Jnana Yoga Marg. Another place in love, he calls it as a divine romance in the Goddess Infinite Love. So you can look at it from a Bhakti Yoga point of view. And then in another instance, he calls this as a divine sport. It's more like a karma yoga where you use your hands, in sports. So these different kind of analogies kind of gives us a indication that this whole divine game, as we know, has certain rules. And if we have to follow the rules, in terms of those postulates, how to love God, my wish, the seven realities, etc. And I believe that when we are talking about trying to remember Baba, it is about remembering those postulates and seeing how in our day to day action we are able to use those postulates and stick to that. That is the challenge. Another interesting thing is it's almost like a reality show. Right now I'm in this toy train going from Kunur to Uti. My friend landed up from Bombay, and I'm not going to be here till the end of this month. After the end of this month. So the interesting thing is, you wake up in the morning. I got up at 4:30 and washed my clothes and stuff like that. It's almost like a non-scripted reality show where you do things spontaneously, and the only thing you have to do is to live in the now and make sure that you're able to be self-aware and not create new sanskaras like unintelligent action. So this whole process definitely looks like a game. But in this big divine game, this is a divine dream of God, right? Because right from the time the question mark, who am I, comes, the whole illusion starts from the false nothing. Remember, there is real everything, there is real nothing, then you have false nothing, and then false everything. From false nothing, this whole creation has started. So that is something we should keep in mind all the time whenever we are trying to look at all these different concepts. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Hey,
So,
Baba.
what's the temperature out in Kunur?
About 15 degrees, I think, 13, 15 degrees.
I think 15 should be your
30.
peak. 15 should be high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Bangalore is so cold and foggy. It is very, very wintry. I think the fog kind of set in last 3-4 days, but it's almost 8:20. This fog around my apartment even now. So
Right.
yeah, great. All right, so let's start with chapter 8. If there are no other comments and responses, yes, we shall go ahead. It's the chapter on love and God. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. There can be no greater folly than the aspirant quarrel with each another over the pros and cons of this way or that, instead of concentrating on his own onward march. One road may be steep, another full of potholes, a third torn by racing rivers. Similarly, one man may walk best, another may be a good runner, a third a fine swimmer. In each case, the things that should really count are the destination and the progress of each individual and the progress each individual makes. Why should one who runs like a hare come in the way of another who's more likely to succeed at the pace of a snail? Spiritual progress is like climbing through hills, dales, thorny woods, and along dangerous precipices to attain the mountain top. On this path, there can be no halting or return. Everyone must get to the top, which is the direct realization of the Supreme Godhead. All hesitation, sidetracking, or resting in halfway houses, or arguing about the best route only postpones the day of final fulfillment. The aspirant cannot be too alert about the path. The slightest lingering in the false world of shadows is inevitably an invitation to suffering that could have been avoided if the eye had been steadily fixed on the supreme goal of life. The best of all forces which can overcome all difficulties on the way is the love that knows how to give without need to bargain for a return. There is nothing that love cannot achieve, and there is nothing that love cannot sacrifice. There is nothing beyond God, and there is nothing without God, and yet God can always be captured by love. All other essential qualities will come to the aspirant if he follows faithfully the whisperings of the unerring voice of love that speaks from his own heart, shedding light on the path. To lose hold of the mantle of this guide is to find only despair. The heart without love is entombed in unending darkness and suffering. But the heart that is restless with love is on its way to realization of the unfading light that shines on the unfathomable sweetness of life divine. Pure love is matchless in majesty. It has no parallel in power, and there is no darkness it cannot dispel. It is the undying flame that has set all life aglow, yet it must be kindled and rekindled in the abysmal darkness of selfish thoughts, selfish words, and selfish deeds. As it is fired anew, it bursts out in magnificent light to serve as a beacon for those who still grope in the darkness of selfishness, be that darkness deep blue or all black. Human love, regardless of its limitations, should never be despised. It is bound eventually to break through all limitations to initiate the aspirant into eternal life in the truth. Then the lover may lose his separate false self and become united with God, who is the one matchless and indivisible ocean of unsurpassable love. God does not listen to the language of the tongue and its japs, mantras, devotional songs, and so on. He does not listen to the language of the mind and its routine meditations, concentrations, and thoughts about God. He listens only to the language of the heart and its message of love, which needs no ceremony or show, only silent devotion for the beloved. This love can be expressed in various ways, all of which ultimately result in union with God. The practical way for the average man to express love is to speak lovingly, think lovingly, and act lovingly towards all mankind, feeling God to be present in everyone. Love is dynamic in action and contagious in effect. It is only the spiritually alive and enlightened who can feel the significance of the ancient adage, so cheaply bandied about by some preachers and philosophers, that love begets love. The way of love is not free from sacrifices. Just as heat and light go hand in hand, so do love and sacrifice. The true spirit of sacrifice springs spontaneously, like humility, and cannot be aware of itself nor reserve itself for particular objects and special occasions. Love means suffering and pain for oneself and happiness for others. To the giver, it is suffering without malice or hatred. To the receiver, it is a blessing without obligation. Just as it can never be too early or too late to learn to love for the sake of love, so there can be nothing too small or too big to be sacrificed or sacrificed for. The flow of life, the flow of light, and the flow of love are as much in the drop as in the ocean. The smallest thing is as big as the biggest, and the biggest thing is as small as the smallest. It all depends upon the particular yardstick used. The spirit of true love and real sacrifice is beyond all ledgers and needs no measure. A constant longing to love and be loving, and a non-calculating will to sacrifice in every walk of life, high and low, big and small, between home and office, streets and cities, countries and continents, are the best measures man can take to be really selfful and joyful. Love is different from lust. In lust, there is dependence upon the physical object, and thus spiritual subordination of the soul to it. Love puts the soul into direct coordinate relation with the reality which lie behind the form. Therefore, lust is experienced as being heavy, but love is experienced as being light. In lust, there is a narrowing down of life, while in love, there is an expansion in being. To have loved one's soul is like adding its life to your own. Your life is multiplied and you live virtually in two centers. If you love the whole world, you live vicariously in the whole world. But in lust, there is an ebbing of life and generation of a sense of hopeless dependence upon a form which is regarded as another. Thus, in lust, there is accentuation of separateness and suffering, but in love, there is a feeling of unity and joy. Lust is dissipation. Love is recreation. Lust is a craving of the senses. Love is the expression of spirit. Lust seeks fulfillment, but love experiences fulfillment. In lust, there is excitement. In love, there is tranquility. Divine love is qualitatively different from human love. Human love is for the many in the one, and divine love is for the one in the many. Human love leads to innumerable complications, but divine love leads to freedom. In divine love, the personal and impersonal aspects are equally balanced. But in human love, the two aspects are in alternating ascendancy. Human love, in its personal and impersonal aspects, is limited, but divine love, with its fusion of the personal and impersonal aspects, is infinite in being and expression. If instead of seeing fault in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. If we suffer in the sufferings of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. If instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves as more fortunate than many others, we are loving God. If we endure our lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. If we understand that the greatest act of devotion towards God is not to harm any of His beings, we are loving God. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and find Him as our own self. Therefore, let us become this. Sure.
Karthik, the last paragraph regarding divine love is really profound. You can repeat that, I think. Previous page, last paragraph.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Divine love is qualitatively different from human love. Human love is for the many in the one, and divine love is for the one in the many.
This is human a love, very, very nice definition.
Way to put it.
Of God
I think
also.
It's there even in the chapter on love,
yes.
in Discourses. The same line, I think, is there. I'm not sure. Yeah. Human love.
I haven't.
You're going up the hills and the clouds are covering your voice. Your voice is really bad, Kama. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we will wait for him
Did you hear me?
Clear out.
Yeah, try again. We just heard you say, "Hear me now."
Okay, the one self in the many ego personality selves. So one in the many refers to the one self, which is the same in all of us, the realized self. But the many is the many ego personality selves, which is unique to each individual drop soul. So that is the expression, that, yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Human love leads to innumerable complications, but divine love leads to freedom. In divine love, the personal and impersonal aspects are equally balanced. But in human love, the two aspects are in alternating ascendancy. Human love, in its personal and impersonal aspects, is limited, but divine love, with its fusion of the personal and impersonal aspects, is infinite in being and expression.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll reread from here. Therefore, let us become the soldiers of God. Let us struggle for the truth. Let us live not for ourselves, but for others. Let us speak truly, think truly, and act truly. Let us be honest as God is infinite honesty. Let us return love for hatred and win others over to God. Let the world know that above everything, the most dear to our hearts is God, the supreme reality. Besides keeping God before ourselves in our daily lives and loving Him by loving our fellow men, we can love God by surrendering to the Sadguru or perfect master who is God's personal manifestation, or to the God man who is God descended directly into form. To surrender to any of these is to surrender to God Himself. This is my song. For the rich, I am the richest. For the poor, I am the poorest. For the literate, I am the most literate. For the illiterate, I am the most illiterate. Thus, I am one of you, one with you, and one in you, and we are all one. To have my real darshan is to find me. The way to find me is to find your abode in me. And the only one and sure way to find your abode in me is to love me. To love me as I love you, you must receive my grace. Only my grace can bestow the gift of divine love. To receive my grace, you must obey me wholeheartedly, with a firm foundation of unshakable faith in me. And you can obey me spontaneously as I want, when you completely surrender yourselves to me so that my wish becomes your law and my love sustains your being. Age after age, many aspire for such a surrender, but only very few really attempt to surrender to me completely as I want. He who succeeds ultimately not only finds me, but becomes me and realizes the aim of life. The final way to realize God is to love Him and to lose oneself in Him through intense longing for union with Him. To love God wholeheartedly is to lose oneself eventually in the beloved and enter the eternal life of God. Like a tree, such love has branches, branches of wholehearted devotion, perfect selfless service, self-denial, self-sacrifice, self-renunciation, self-annihilation, and truth. In this love are embodied all the yogas known to saint and seeker. The highest aspect of this love, which surpasses love itself, is that of complete surrender to the will of the beloved. This means complete obedience to his wishes, regardless of the cost. The perfect masters are always immersed in the joy of this union with God and can never be snared in the mazes of the illusory universe. Therefore, they do not ordinarily pay any attention to the universe other than to divert the attention of humanity from the shadow to the substance. Divine love makes the individual true to himself and to others. It makes him live honestly, comprehending that God is infinite honesty. Divine love is the solution to all difficulties and problems. It frees man from all bindings. It makes him speak truly, think truly, and act truly. It makes him feel one with the whole universe. Divine love purifies the heart and glorifies one's being. When one truly loves God, That love is based on the desire to give up one's whole being to the beloved. When one loves a perfect master, one longs to serve him, to surrender to his will, to obey him wholeheartedly. Thus, pure, real love longs to give and does not ask for anything in return. When the individual truly loves humanity, he gives all for its happiness. When he truly loves his country, he longs to sacrifice life itself without seeking reward and without the least thought of having loved and served. When he truly loves his friends, he longs to help them without making them feel under the least obligation. When he truly loves his enemies, he longs to make them his friends. True love for parents or family makes him long to give them every comfort at the cost of his own. Trust God completely, and he will solve all difficulties. Faithfully leave everything to him, and he will see to everything. Love God sincerely, and he will reveal himself. And as you love, your heart must love, so that even your mind is not aware of it. As you love God wholeheartedly and honestly, sacrificing everything at the altar of his supreme love, you will realize the beloved within you. Okay, that brings us to the close of that chapter on love and God.
Not the close, it opens out a large vista to think and receive.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
This one more paragraph is quite nice. Like a tree, such love has branches of wholehearted devotion, perfect selfless service, self-denial, self-sacrifice, self-renunciation, self-annihilation, and truth. In this love are embedded all the yogas known to saint and seeker. The highest aspect of this love, which surpasses love itself, is that of complete surrender to the will of the beloved. This means complete obedience to his wishes regardless of the cost. So this is a sort of very profound definition of love, wherein everything else is absorbed into. So that's a nice way of looking at love, I think.
Yeah. Branches of wholehearted devotion, perfect selfless service, self-denial, self-sacrifice, self-renunciation, and self-annihilation. Yeah. There was another word I saw for the first time above, and I wanted to make a note. There was a hyphenated word with self. Let me go and search it up. Yeah. So one of the beautiful expressions I love in the Baba literature is how he defines and how he talks about selfishness. And the journey from selfishness to selflessness is actually permeated or intermediated by selfness for all, right? So I like that play of the words and the imagery there is very beautiful. Selfishness is one end of the spectrum. Then you become you see the selfness in all, and then you go to selflessness. So I saw this expression which was new. The spirit of true love and real sacrifice beyond all ledgers and needs no measure, a constant longing to love and be loving, and a non-calculating will to sacrifice in every walk of life, high and low, big and small, between home and office, streets and cities, countries and continents, are the best measures man can take to be really self-full and joyful. So I thought we should just take a look at that again. Yeah. Cool. So
Jai Baba, but there is Jai Baba, there is something. One is the divine beloved is our own self. Okay.
Yeah.
As we know, when we are looking at the Baba, when he says, remember me, what he's saying is he's pointing us towards our own self, because we know from the divine theme that Baba was the first drop soul who became God realized. So he's the representative of God, the messenger of God, through whom we are able to find our own self. Because this is a game of hide and seek. So the medium is love, and love is about relationships. And the relationships means how do you behave? And that is what all the messages are all about. Relationship with animate and inanimate matter in your waking state. And this game of hide and seek is only during the waking state, or what we call as the waking dream state, from which we need to awaken. And also, if you go further, he has also told us that reincarnation is false illusion, involution is real illusion, false illusion plus real illusion is equal to zero. So, in a way, you can, the way for me, the insight nowadays is where you are playing this game as soon as you wake up. You are like in a reality. Now, how do you act? And that is where all these messages or postulates kind of help, And so, of course, we have been instructed about the different forms of love, degrees of love and all that, which starts from the rudimentary love, from the forces of attraction in magnetism and all that. Then you come to animal love, then the human love, then the pure love, which comes in the first plane of involution. And then the ultimate is the divine love, which is basically union with your own self.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's a good point, right? It's a game, and the game analogy, I think Kama is sold on, right? And it grows on you. I'm sold on it too. The game, like a computer game, right? So it is what it is, right? So you come with your own avatars, and you're playing that game. Interestingly, how many of you have heard this new concept called metaverse? Anybody?
Metaverse.
Metaverse, yeah.
Everybody's watching Netflix and
What's that? We didn't hear fully what you said. Nope.
Yeah.
And again, bad.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
No. Try again.
Hello? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is that all the shows that we see, Netflix and all these shows that people are so engrossed, it's almost like everybody is playing a game. You're watching other people's games. People make shows and you watch. But in reality, the only game
is yours.
That's the ultimate game. You're making your own Netflix. So that's it. You're a player actor in the 21st century in the metaverse, multiverse,
No, this is not multiverse. Multiverse, of course, has been around for a longer time. Metaverse is a new term now talking about, I don't know how many of you have heard of Second Life. Second Life is basically a virtual environment that took a lot of, became very popular in the 2000. It was a digital environment which was ahead of its time, where you could go and have your own life and live, have a pet, have a house, and so on and so forth. Now, with technology moving at the pace that it is, especially with blockchain and with virtual reality, now there is a projection of digital universe which people go and live in, right? So it's crazy. I mean, when you have the time, please start reading about it. I've been looking at it in the last couple of months, and there is a Mars in metaverse, right? Like there's moon in metaverse. They've created it virtually.
Yes,
people have created
I just read about it.
Great. So they sold plots on the moon for millions of dollars. not on the real moon, on the metaverse moon, and people pay money for that, right? So I don't know. The lines are blurring between. We are still struggling with what we know now as illusion, which most of the world thinks is real, and now we are up to creating more and more illusions, right? Degrees of illusion in, in this illusory world. So anyway, that's something for us to think about. That's the context we live in.
Yes, but one non-illusory thing is the money always tagged to everything.
That I will have a separate conversation with you. I have challenged that. I've challenged that with a patent. Money is not the true representation of value. I'm not talking value in discourses terms. Real value.
No, I am not also talking of value, but everything new which comes up gets tagged to the aspect of money alone.
That's the way society is structured, and in fact, the patent I have co-authored challenges that. We say, me and Anant and Ganesh challenge the concept of value being expressed only in monetary terms. And in fact, we have created a hypothesis of alternate ways of transacting or representing or even recording value, right? And that's the core of what we have done in that patent. So I think I've shared that long back with you, but it's very dense stuff. Too much of math, too much of dense. It's discourses.
But I think that. But you know what I think is when you're talking about money, it has more to do with the material life. So
Absolutely.
in terms of material life, it has a value. But in terms of spiritual life, nothing. It has no value, right? So it's a very relative aspect. So it's a medium, just like oxygen is a medium to keep the body, and love is the medium to success or achievements or progress. So money is just a medium, but they have made money into a big thing, right? And it's a false illusion. It is a false belief system, basically.
Absolutely. It's the probably the most dangerous and powerful false belief that has erected and been sustained by humanity. Undeniably, right? If there was no money, values would have been better, morals would have been better, there would have been better society, love would have been more pervasive. But well, it's too late now. Okay, so we have two choices. We have like 4 pages of help to others. That's chapter 9. And I suggest that we stretch a little and finish that and go to part 3 from tomorrow. Okay, so I'll read help to others. Or we can stop here and pick it up tomorrow.
I will quit here. Jai Baba.
Okay, we'll stop here. We don't have too many minutes anyway. We have 7 minutes. So we'll stop here and we start tomorrow with chapter 9 and then move on to part 3 from there. We'll stop a little early today. That's fine. Anything else before we wrap up? Jayanti has been quiet.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been quiet with low energy, so I thought I'd listen and learn from everybody's perspective.
Low energy because of a late night, low energy because of something else. How are you?
Overwork for this week.
Okay. Take it easy, unwind in the weekend, and be full of energy tomorrow.
Yes.
All right. All right. Safe travels, Kama, and see you, Sanjay ji, and we will all get back tomorrow.
Okay.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Thank you.
Jai Baba. Thank you.
Yes.